In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. In 1992, I found myself a deacon in the Roman Catholic Church, about to be ordained to the priesthood. But I could not do it, and I walked away. What do you do when you are a failed Roman Catholic cleric with a PhD in liturgical studies? What you do is teach. So I got a job in the religion department of a Roman Catholic high school in Brooklyn. And 3 months before the beginning of the academic year, I took a tragically Spartan sublet in Park Slope before Park Slope was Park Slope. Then came the first Sunday in that Spartan apartment, and I went to Mass at the local Roman Catholic church. It was heartbreaking. I wondered why in the world anyone would ever go. Then the next Sunday came, and the next, and every place I tried was worse than the last. And I was bereft. A Jesuit friend of mine, one of my oldest and best friends, asked me, he actually begged me, really, not to give up. He asked me to try just one last church. There's this place at Hudson and Christopher, he said. At least try that. So I did. And that Sunday, I joined the Episcopal Church, whether officially or not. It was June. It was the Sunday before Pride Sunday. That was just 6 years after St. Luke's had reopened after the fire. Ledley Laughlin had just retired after being rector for 2 decades. Bruce Weber, who really should have been a professional singer, was the interim rector. Molly McGreevy was the assistant, and I had never heard and never since have heard anyone preach like Molly McGreevy. The new prayer book was new then. It was new. It was just 13 years old, and the hymnal 1982 had just turned 10. Everything at that little church my Jesuit friend sent me to, everything seemed new. Behold, the one seated on the throne in the book of Revelation says, "Behold, I am making all things new." St. Luke's was a reflection of heaven. The congregation was almost all men in those days, almost all gay men, and they were dying. And even those who weren't dying were watching people they loved actively and painfully die. And that was a sort of death, too, helplessly watching death overtake mostly very young men long before it should have. If you didn't go through it, you cannot imagine it. And the next Sunday was Pride. The parade used to end on Christopher Street. So a lot of the people in the parade just kept marching right through those doors for Evensong. So my second Sunday, my second liturgy at St. Luke's was this day and this service in 1992. There was not one empty seat. There wasn't even any place left to stand in the aisles. And the bell rang, and we stood up, and we sang, and I had never heard anything like it in my life, or felt anything like it. By rights, those windows should have blown right out. Death was in our bodies. But there was a life in us that was more than death. It was the life of knowing that the one who is seated on the throne is making all things new. It was the life of unearned, undeserved grace. We knew with a certainty beyond any certainty that Jesus had died a death at least as horrific as the death so many of us were dying. Jesus knew. God knew. We are dying again. It was a virus killing us then. Now it's Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and the Southern Baptist Convention. And this new virus is just as deadly as HIV. We are all the targets of this virulence. Not one of us queer folks is immune. Do not doubt it. And you, our dear friends who are not queer, you are like those of us in 1992 who weren't dying ourselves, but were watching our beloved friends being slowly, painfully erased. This death dealing today, it wants us queer folks gone. Since those days when HIV so devastated us, we gay people, especially we gay men, have become a force hard to resist, certainly hard to dominate. So, evil looks for a scapegoat that still is vulnerable. It's trans people this time round. They are bearing the weight of the hatred for the rest of us. But do not be fooled. The hate is meant for us all. Suicide prevention hotlines for gay kids, U.S. Navy ships, decorated military officers, even Sheridan Square. We are being erased. An Italian soccer team, you probably saw this, an Italian soccer team had an audience with Trump on Wednesday. Can you imagine that the only thing he could find to talk to them about was how disgusted they should be if a trans man were to try to join their team? And you saw their faces. They couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that that's all the President of the United States could think to say. Sadly, I can believe it. I would expect it. And the one seated on the throne says, "Behold, I am making all things new." What we should do to fight back against this virulence. It is not my task today, or really any day, to say what exactly we should do. That is not my job. But as we do whatever we do to fight this death dealing. And when you consider that funding has just been cut for LGBTQ suicide prevention, you know that this really is death dealing. As we fight this death dealing, we have to run again and again into the palpable strength that this place has always offered weary warriors. Brave but weary warriors. And not just this place. There are places like this across the Episcopal Church and across the larger American Christian landscape. Places where people are convinced that Jesus is bringing risen life to what looks like death. That Jesus is making all things new, even as all things seem to be falling into decay. So convinced that we sing so loudly, with such force, with such joy, that the sound of it will blow through the windows and out into the city, out into a city that needs to hear the good news we have heard. Ponder anew what the Almighty can do. That's what we'll sing in the office hymn in just a moment. Ponder anew what the Almighty can do. God's love can do a new thing, even when we seem to be slipping back into an old thing that most of us thought was gone forever. Well, we were wrong about that. But hope will not leave us disappointed. Ponder anew what the Almighty can do. That first Sunday, the Sunday at morning Mass, I watched people, mostly men, and a handful of spectacular women. I watched them literally carrying men to that Lord's table who could not even stand up. I can see Howard Galley. How many of you remember Howard Galley? I can remember Howard Galley and all that leather and all those chains and his entourage. I can see them lifting and holding and steadying the weakest among us so that again, and maybe for the last time, they could draw near to Jesus. Draw near to that table where Jesus feeds us with nothing less than his very life, his risen life. That table where Jesus takes what is dying and old, and behold, he makes it new. And maybe that is the fire in the belly that made us sing with such insane abandon that next Sunday at Evensong, this Sunday, this service. Maybe what gave us the fire in the belly was all the love in that room. And it's still here, that love. And the world, certainly the queer world, but truly the entire world, the world needs what we have. And so in the midst of death, we proclaim life. And when it's hard even to look at what's happening, we raise our eyes and we see the one seated on the throne making all things new. And we ponder. We ponder anew what the Almighty can do, who with his love doth befriend us.